So we are here to present the budget, and this budget is a reflection of our values and invest in the most critical needs of the city. There is a difference between spending and investing. This budget makes investments to bring people inside, in public safety, and in other areas that will net a return in terms of lives saved, in terms of quality of life and better neighborhoods, and it will save the city money in the long run. This is a bold budget, and it is a responsible budget. The goal is to make both big changes and to chart a course of sustainable change. With 40,000 people unhoused in our city, and with the size of our police department possibly dropping to 2002 levels, there are no quick fixes, and I will not engage in Band-Aid budgeting. This is a real sustainable plan for change and a new direction for Los Angeles. This budget charts a course to a new Los Angeles, one that is stronger, healthier, happier, and safer. My budget commits nearly $1.3 billion more money than ever before to move people indoors and confront the crisis of homelessness. This is a record for the city of Los Angeles that will accelerate our work on homelessness. Its significance goes beyond its record-breaking scale. With much of the pandemic funding unavailable this year, this represents a big city funding increase. We are scaling up Inside Safe with a $250 million investment to address more encampments across our entire city. Ideally, as we scale up, we would like to have outreach teams and Inside Safe teams in every council district every day. This budget breaks new ground by funding the purchase of hotels and motels, which will reduce costs compared with renting rooms. This is long overdue and something the community sees as just common sense. In other words, the purpose of purchasing the hotels and motels is because we really do need a permanent infrastructure for temporary housing. This budget also breaks new ground by using tobacco and opioid settlement money for our own substance abuse and mental health treatment beds. It will allow us to spend the money directly with the nonprofit organizations that provide treatment services so that when we're in tents and at motels, if somebody is ready to be clean, we want to make sure there is a bed ready for them that day. We all know that substance abuse and mental illness disproportionately affects the unhoused. We say people could get the help, but like I just said, we need to make sure that it's available when they're ready. So this budget supports an urgent effort to also grow the police department to make up for attrition, to reach an end-of-the-year size of 2,500 officers. This budget supports the hiring of officers and supports bringing back recently retired officers. This is an ambitious goal, but we must be bold to change the downward trend in the size of LAPD as we work to restore the department to its full size. Now, at the same time, though, this budget supports our new Mayor's Office of Community Safety to cement our firm commitment to community engagement and community services as a core part of our public safety strategy. We want to have the Office of Community Safety build out the infrastructure for non-law enforcement responses and build out the infrastructure so that our city can move to prevent crime and reduce crime. This budget makes clear that we have a holistic view of public safety, and we want our officers responding to crime. We should not rely on them for being the first responders to homelessness, mental health, or other crises. This combination will lead to safer neighborhoods, saved lives, and saved money. Again, there is a difference between investments and savings. We are making common sense and strategic investments with this budget. We also fund 5 classes of 60 firefighters each, which with attrition will net 100 more firefighters to save Angelenos, and a new emergency appointment paramedic program so that we can put paramedics to work immediately. I do think it's important for people to know that 80% of the calls to the fire department are medical emergencies. My administration's plan for the year recommits to the city's zero emission goals invest in our ideal that our neighborhoods should be clean and in good repair, and seeks to help businesses thrive and more Angelenos to earn paychecks that cover their bills. In the year ahead, we must work collectively and strategically to develop solutions for the many challenges we face, and we must be prepared for fiscal headwinds, which is why this budget contains reserves of 10% of general fund receipts. There are no simple answers, however. Los Angeles is one of the most intricate and complex cities in the world. If we tap the vibrancy and diversity of our people, however, we will transform Los Angeles into a model city where everyone can afford to live, where everyone is safe, and where everyone feels secure about their and their children's future. This is the new LA that we are building together, and I'm happy to take your questions.
So before we take questions, I also wanted to make sure people have the budget summaries. There are also QR codes floating around that will have access to all the budget documents if you need that. First question is going to go to Craig, and the second question is Dave.
Matt, Bernice. Hello. Yes, you were.
You've got a couple people, 3 people on council kind of campaign on shrinking LAPD. What kind of sales pitch do you make to them to increase funding to get to 9,504 officers by end of June next year? And then also, are there any fee increases in the budget that generate more revenue?
I'll handle the one about council, and then you guys can handle the one about fees. First of all, I am really happy and proud of the relationship that I've developed with every single member of the City Council, including those who I know are not going to be supportive of that part of the budget, and I understand that. But where we do have common ground is in the Mayor's Office of Community Safety. A lot of investment in understanding that crime can be prevented and reduced, and so I will focus on where we have unity. I don't expect for them to cheer about an increase in size, but the reality is that we have our numbers for law enforcement are way down, just like they are around the country. And there is no reason to think that we are not going to drop to a historically low number of police officers.
We'll answer this next question jointly. I just want to clarify that there are no fee increases that were included in the budget to support any of the program initiatives that we've been discussing. There are some increases that are just part of the normal operation of the specific fee in particular. One of those increases is in false alarm. Can you?
Sure. So there are minor number of adjustments in planning and cultural affairs fees, as Bernice said, and by the way, Matt Zabo, CAO. As Bernice said, these aren't fees that are increased to generate revenue for the programs. These are fees generated to cover the cost of the services rendered. There is a proposal for a false alarm fee from the fire department that is a new fee to be paid for false alarms up to $322.
Next question is for...
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I just neglected to introduce myself. Good morning, everyone. I'm Bernice Hollins. I'm the Mayor's Senior Budget Director.
Next question is to Dave and then Josh.
I have a two-part question about the LAPD. You mentioned your fear about 9,000, and I'm wondering if there's something with greater resonance about 9,000 than I'm realizing. The other question is, you've talked about falling below 9,000. The other thing is, it looks like you're looking to have 200 retired officers come back, and I'm wondering about the wisdom of having such a large number of staff that have an expiration date. You basically could end up turning into a pumpkin at the end of the fiscal year next year.
Oh, you're so optimistic. Really, it's about how we can bring in officers that are ready to hit the ground running. So obviously, trying to work with those who have recently retired is the best way to do that. Now, I've been to 2 graduations, and I know our Deputy Mayor Williams has been to graduations, and you know that the department struggles with getting to the maximum number of recruits. bottom line is we really have to do all of it at the same time. So that's the reason for that. And then I am glad that that crime has been going down in certain areas, but you and I have been around long enough to know the crime cycles. And so I would love to think that crime will continue going down and it'll never come back up again, but we need to be prepared for that. Now, again, at the same time, what's most important is building up the Office of Community Safety, so hopefully we can keep crime on a trajectory of going down.
And the 9,000, is there something bigger about 9,000 that you're worried about? I mean, you've been talking about not wanting to go below.
Well, I mean, if you just think about it, you know, just a couple of years ago, the goal was 10,000. And when I was campaigning, I said 9,700 because that's what was allocated in the last budget. So if we are down to 9,100, it's not realistic to think that we'd get to 10,000. A lot of people believe, and it's a subject for debate, whether or not a city this large should have a police force of 10,000. And so the idea that we would be below 9,000, I think, could be very significant.
Josh and then Dakota.
Mayor Bass, can you talk about how you would spend the $250 million that's going to Inside Safe? And many times you've said we're running out of motels, or there's many council district areas where there aren't motels.
Yeah.
So how would you spend that money, and what do you do when they don't exist?
Okay. So to answer the first part of the question, the $250 million is based into two broad components. 203 is going to the base funding of the budget. 47 million is set aside for acquisition of motels for interim housing. To do the breakdown of the base budget, approximately 50%, 110 million, is going into the temporary stay, the motel component. We're already working on driving that cost factor down. There's been lessons learned from the current program, and like I said, that is the larger component of the cost, but we're working on bringing that down to decrease the per capita cost of the program. In addition, about 30% of the base budget is going into support services. That's paying for food, that's paying for case management, that's paying for actual direct services that the participants would receive. Permanent housing is about 10%. Coming in at 21 million. That's to actually transition the participants into permanent housing with up to a 12-month rental assistance. The last portion that's very reasonable in terms of cost is 5% for the administrative and staffing component, and I want to emphasize that that's also funding the administrative component for the service providers themselves.
But what do you do if the motels don't exist and you run out of motels that fill up?
Good morning. My name is Mercedes Marquez. I'm the Mayor's Chief for Housing and Homelessness Solutions. It isn't that motels don't exist. It's that this is a voluntary program. So motel owners, for whatever reason, choose to involve themselves in renting or not. It is also that we're not able to pay whatever a nightly fee is, no matter what it is. The market fluctuates, so there are things that are just, it's not feasible for us. So that is why when you try to stabilize a market, you try to stabilize a price. That is why we're going to go after purchasing hotels. There are hotels. It's just not necessarily that they're voluntary in our program. It also means you bring down the cost significantly, right? By paying approximately anywhere between, I'd say, $190,000 to $210,000 per room, depending on the market, we could purchase anywhere from 8 to 10 properties this year and give us the beginning of a permanent source of interim housing to help transition people from the street, from tents, into permanent housing.
So the next,
Yeah, I just wanted to say that many of you have covered the situation on San Vicente, and that's a perfect example because that's an area where I'm sure there are rooms, but they're extremely expensive. So we're working with Councilmember Yarslowski now to figure out how we maybe raise from private sources the gap.
before we take the next question, which will be Dakota, just a reminder that in the summary document, that has most of the numbers that you're asking for. Dakota?
Sure. You're touting the increased funding for animal services, but I suspect both that department and the volunteers and employees are going to be disappointed. The department had asked for a 56% increase. The budget has a 17% increase. the general manager has said that she only has staff to run 4 shelters, even though the city has 6 shelters. So this clearly is below what they wanted, given that these are, animals, live animals being cared for. Why? What do you say to those critics of the funding?
Dakota, we'll follow up portions of that question for you later today. But in general, we have provided investments to address some of the current issues that have been discussed in the media about the Animal Services Department. We're providing additional personnel specifically for animal care and to support the adoptions and permanent placements. In addition, we've also funded positions to continue coordinating volunteer positions. But like I said, let us follow up with you on some of those very specific issues that you raised at some point today.
Next question is to Nick and then Julie.
Hi, Mayor. Victor with LAS. Wanted to ask you a couple questions. One about mental health crisis response and 24/7 response team. You mentioned it in your speech last night. I'm interested to know how this budget helps you get there, how far you will be reaching in terms of meeting the need, because the need is so great, as you mentioned, and the resources so few currently. So interested in those specifics, as well about your goal you set out to house 17,000 unhoused people by the end of your first year in administration in office. Where are you at on that goal? Do you feel like this budget gets you the resources you need to make that happen? Interested to learn more about it.
Sure. It's certainly our intent to reach our goal. One of the ways, obviously, is Inside Safe, but remember, Inside Safe is just a piece. The other thing is really fast-tracking developments that had been stuck. Like I mentioned, 360. I mentioned several hundred that were stuck because they had funding gaps. So by doing all of that, which is a variety, and certainly our chief can respond in more detail, that's how we plan to get there. And then the first part of your question was? Oh, yes, the mental health crisis teams. Well, CIRCLE is the program and looking to put specific funding there. Right now there's a lot of issues, because part of it is my commitment, along with the chief, to make sure that every officer in LAPD has a better understanding and specific training around mental health, because one of the issues, such as the problem that happened in January with the 3 individuals who might have been in a mental health crisis, is making sure that LAPD knows when to call. But then we have to make sure that somebody picks up the phone. So all of that, including having more 911 operators, all of that is interconnected, and will help us get there. Thank you.
Julia and then Phil.
Hi, I was hoping someone could speak a little bit more about the $25 million for eviction defense and the $6 million for tenant outreach. Do the eviction defense funds, do those include funding for the program council is looking at that would provide lawyers for tenants who can't afford them? And then in the money for tenant outreach, does that include more money for the housing department, people who have questions about the new tenant protection laws?
You're referring to the dollars as they're allocated in the ULA?
Yes.
Okay. So all of those programs, let's say tenant protections in general, right? It is now it's time to bring life to many of the ordinances that have been passed by the City Council and haven't been adequately funded. So now we are talking about information on eviction defense. We don't have a right to counsel law in the City Council yet, so we're not talking about funding a program that doesn't yet exist. But there are many other things. There are service providers all across the city that are providing services for eviction defense. So we're trying to build a system. Also in that same list of programs, though, are things for assistance both to tenants and what will be mom and pop programs. So it is across the spectrum of rental issues, both protections against harassment, making sure that people know their rights, things as simple as, now that the moratorium has expired, if you receive an eviction, you must file an answer in order to bring forward your COVID defenses. But if you don't know that you must file an answer, right, you don't, and then you face eviction when you may have had a perfectly good defense. So it is about education across the board, focusing in on tenant harassment, as well as starting to work with mom and pop landlords on how we help them stay afloat and prosper on the issues where their tenants are having a hard time paying rent. So it's across the board.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the ULA and the fact that, boy, would we love to spend the $672 million. But we want to be conservative about that because of the lawsuits. So we are going to spend $150 million, and then just to guarantee, then we are looking for FEMA to backfill that in the event that ULA is challenged. When I was in D.C. in January, I met with Secretary Mayorkas. I told him that FEMA owes us money. We need to be paid. And I did a call with the FEMA director just a couple of days ago that said that the money is obligated. So we know for sure that we will get that money.
We're going to go Phil and then John. Yeah, Phil, go for it.
Have you identified a specific motel or hotel yet that you're trying to purchase?
Yeah.
There are a few, but were I to tell you what they were, the price would go up.
Well, it's going to be public soon.
Well, I'll deal with the price increase then.
We have a follow-up. Quick couple of proposals. Just one. All right, two. And you already asked one, so this is your
Would you
second.
consider, similar to what Dr. Ferrer did during COVID from the county, would you consider weekly briefings with statistics on homeless, how many people you've reached out to, how many people you've moved inside, how many people are out there?
You know, we hadn't considered that. I'm not opposed to it. Weekly sounds like a bit much, but I wouldn't be opposed to that. We do want this to be transparent, but the thing about this is that we hope Angelenos can see it.
My last question is, what is your message today to people, for example, on San Vicente, who are afraid to go out their door while you work on these big picture plans?
Well, my message to them is going to be direct because I'm going to go talk to them specifically. But my message would be help is on the way. Seriously, I mean, the issue is not the issue is getting the rooms in that area. And if not there, then in another area. So I want them to know that we are actively working on that as soon as we can get the rooms. I can't tell you a date. Well, I can't tell you a date. And by the way, let me just tell you something about that. What we're discovering from Inside Safe, just like if we were to tell you the hotel, the price would go up. If we were to tell you the date, the people would go up. So in a way, because the unhoused people are communicating with each other. So now when we go on move-out day where we might have identified 15 people ready to move, there's 20 people there. So.
We're going to go John and then next.
Got to make sure we have enough rooms.
Hi, I want to ask about the budget for the Office of Community Safety. Its operating budget is $3 million. Can you talk about how you came about that number? And I guess people who are concerned about, the increases to hire as the LP would say, why is, if you're doing both at the same time, why is the Office of Community Safety budget only at $3 million, and how is that sort of decided upon?
It's actually much more than that.
That is just focused on the resources inside the mayor's office, the actual staff that are employed by the mayor's office. But the larger program components are funded in a different portion of the budget, largely the the GCP, General City Purposes budget. So there are, just for one of the programs that fall under the Office of Community Safety, they received a $14 million increase. That's for the Gang Reduction and Youth Development Program that's known as GRID. And so in total, that one program alone will have a total of $41 million next year. So the $3 million, like I said, is just a small portion of the overall response. The intent was to continue all of the programs that provide strategic support for the mission of that office. That includes GRID, what I just mentioned before, the Summer Night Lights, the Circle program that we've talked about earlier, the DART teams, the domestic abuse response teams. That program in itself, just to highlight it, has received a $1 million increase, which will double the number of advocates for that program. So there are significant resources that are involved in the Office of Community Safety, all the initiatives that it will oversee. And, to the point, this is a year one budget. This is providing strategic investments, and it's really in between the 2 years that we're going to be doing various assessments, looking at the performance of all of our various programs, and looking at areas where realignments might make sense. But like I said, for purposes of going into next year, we did provide strategic increases in the areas where we thought they would be effective, and then we'll continue to do our strategic assessment and look at the ways that we want to realign it for the subsequent year.
And just to follow up, for the street medicine teams, I think it was budgeted at $4 million increase. Or can you talk about people who are waiting for hotels or services from Inside Safe, and what sort of services will be offered to them in terms of medicine, in terms of hospital services? Because just last week in one camp, 2 people died waiting for housing. So I'm just trying to ask more about how street medicine will be applied to those people, or.
One of the things that we hope to do, and we hope to do soon, we'll be bringing an individual on our senior staff who is a physician, and she will be establishing a number of MOUs, Memorandum of Understandings, with the various universities and schools in town so that we can help bolster the staff. You're talking about doctors, nurses, dentists, social workers, to involve the interns in doing that, which, by the way, the street medicine team from USC and UCLA is composed of that as well. So we're looking at creative, innovative ways of bolstering services. There are the services that the county provides through LASA, but we just believe that in order to get to scale, we need to look for ways to massively expand what we're doing currently. It's just not enough, and the community-based organizations that provide those services now cannot get to scale.
We're going to go right here next to John, and then we're going to go to Connie.
I have a follow-up on that. Question about your partnership with the USC Street Medicine team. How did that partnership come about, and what's the rollout going to look like?
It's happening already.
The city has already partnered with USC Street Medicine before. So this is a relationship. It's not a long-term relationship, but it already existed. So what we are now doing in partnership with the City Council and others is taking a look at exactly where the street medicine teams are contracted to be, and we're matching them against encampments that are already priorities for many, many reasons, and are now grouping that with other resources of service providers, and that is creating a really robust way of doing outreach and treating people even before we get them into rooms, right? So we know a lot more about them even before we house them, and it gives us a sense of whether they need something more specifically than a hotel room.
And on the $1 million allocated to the USC Street Medicine team, what is that $1 million going to do? Like, where does that $1 million go?
The $1 million obviously goes to that service. Through that, you can see in the contracts, they're in several parts of the city, so in pretty large swatches of the city. Over time, depending on how much money we're talking about, it's how many clients they charge. I believe that in the current, I don't want to say in this new budget, but in the current budget we have, that is that they will seek 1,400 new patients. And so we're working with them now, and in fact, we're doing an encampment resolution with them this week.
How many do they currently have?
I can't. I have to get back to you about how they have in total.
We're going to go Conan, and then right here, and then
Thank you, Mayor. 2 quick questions. The Protective League says attrition is not the biggest problem. They say that academy graduates are being picked off by suburban departments because they're being paid more. But also, there's a view of a lack of political support for policing in this building. You do, Craig mentioned, you have members of the council who are opposed to the police department actually existing. You have a city controller who's opposed to hiring the police. Inexplicably, you have a department that released the phone numbers and addresses of police officers and their families. So what do you say to a cadet, a recruit at the academy, who's being offered a job at Sierra Madre or somewhere else, and to tie up to a city that on the surface looks like it does not care about it, is not a priority?
Well, Conan, I hope that in my presentation last night and in the presentation of the budget that we could dispel the view that the city doesn't care. I think the budget certainly reflects on that. I would respectfully disagree with the league that attrition isn't an issue. All of the above are issues. And I also said yesterday, and I will say again, I've actually said many times, I think egregious mistakes were made with the release of many of those names. And I am deeply worried that it is going to lead to more officers leaving, which is exactly why I'm proposing aggressively recruiting and providing incentives for people. I'm hoping that that sends the message. I do understand that my colleagues, some of my colleagues on the council disagree with that, but I think that it's very important because I do believe that my number one job is to keep the city safe. And I believe you keep the city safe in a variety of ways, and the budget reflects that variety.
And a follow-up comment. Nationally, there's been a lot of attention paid to West Coast cities. There's two nights of takeovers in downtown Chicago. The business leaders there are very upset with the mayor. And San Francisco, the flagship Whole Foods across the street from City Hall closed after just a year. You have multiple businesses and chains that closed out of Portland because they can't keep their employees safe. Starbucks closed a few in LA. How concerned are you that what we're seeing there is coming to this city?
Well, I'm very concerned about it. That's why I think that we need to be aggressive in multiple ways. So when I've seen those takeovers are of young people, which is exactly why we need to build up the Office of Community Safety, which is exactly why we're investing funds in summer night lights. I always worry about when the temperatures go up, that is when crime can increase. That's why we want to be very, very aggressive with the Office of Community Safety. Prevent it before it happens.
Right here in the red and black, and then we're going to finish with Lala.
Hello, Mayor. My name is Romeo Montiel with Spectrum News. Just wanted to ask, is it possible to expand the Safety Commission and increase the police force numbers? And in doing so, will that create any tension on the council for both?
Did you increase the police commission?
Yeah.
I don't have any thoughts of doing that right now. I don't know exactly what the reason would be. And we are proposing increasing the police force, and it will cause tensions on the city council. But I am confident that our city council, that we will be able to overcome those tensions. Obviously, I present the budget. They're involved in it. I propose certain numbers. They may agree or disagree. But given the way we have all been working together so well, even with our differences, I feel confident that we will come together and there'll be a budget signed without a lot of controversy.
And then last question to Lala.
Hi, how will the city's budget ensure that Black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses specifically, are granted contract opportunities, supplier diversity, things like that, and funding and access to capital resources?
Well, I think because we have a great deputy mayor in Rachel Freeman, and she knows that that is one of her top priorities, and already she's met with a variety of business organizations. I don't know if you want to say a word, but I feel confident in that. We're working with small businesses, we're working with the minority business organizations, and we have talked a lot about that specific issue.
Hi, good morning. I would just echo the mayor's words that small business, minority-owned business, committed programs to allowing the expansion and support of that is very much the focus of the mayor's office for business and economic development. Looking forward to sharing those plans in the very near future.
Thank you, everyone.
It was clear yesterday that you did not utter the words, "The state of the city is strong." Yes,
Right.
Routinely say that.
Right.
That was a message in and of itself.
Yes.
Explain that briefly.
Well, I think it would be a complete contradiction to say the state of the city is strong when we're in the midst of an emergency declaration. How could I say the state of the city is strong and 40,000 people are intense? So I think it's just really important to be honest, even when it might be a message that people don't want to hear. You're welcome.
All right.